Hello and welcome to Great Western. In this episode, I will be examining the Steve Hogarth era of Marillion. Christmas 1988. Struggling musician Steve H Hogarth visits his music publisher's office asking about work. Perhaps Steve could make himself useful doing some administration, promotion, or doubtless, preferably, running the demo studio over the festive season and into the new year. Anything for a little money. Disillusioned with the music business, Steve and his partner are dreaming of leaving the big smoke and retiring to the Peak District, where Steve is hoping to become a milkman. Steady money, steady hours. Everything the life of a jobbing musician is not. With regard to the festive job opportunities, the office manager tells Steve, "Well, Marillion are looking for a new singer." "I didn't mean that sort of work," deadpans Steve. But fate takes a hand. Imagine the scene. It's 1992 and I'm on a placement year out of university. I'm trying to catch up with music and build up my burgeoning CD collection. It's time to get a Marillion album on my shelf. I've loved this band since I heard Assassin on Top of the Pops in 1984. I really need hard copies of that song, Kaylee, and of course Lavender and Incommunicado. It's a wonderful sunny soundtrack to those formative teenage years at school. So I buy 1992's hit Marillion compilation, the Singles Collection. Now, for 4 years now, I have been aware that national treasure, Fish, has been replaced by another singer, but I've only the vaguest idea of who that is. I put the CD in the tray and press play. We open with Cover My Eyes, brackets Pain and Heaven. A typical Steve Rothery delay pedal figure introduces the song, but then, oh, what on earth? Dangerous shapes, girls in movies, girls on hospital wards, and the guy's voice. Oh, this is terrible. Bring back Fish. Let's at least skip to the Fish tracks on this compilation. Looking back on the album that was subtitled 6 of One, Half a Dozen of the Other, it's easy to see why the casual listener, the buyer who wanted the 80s hits, was confused by this album. Although Fish fans got a few extras, like a forgettable 60 seconds added to Assassin, Steve Hogarth got a full 7 tracks as opposed to Fish's 6, hence the subtitle of the album. And to be honest, how many of them were actually any good? The clincher for fans was a cover of Rare Bird's Sympathy, an event that Fish once said he couldn't give a diddly squat about. And who could disagree? I've avoided this track for the last 25 years, and I'm not in a hurry to listen to it again. And I couldn't even hum the tune to I Will Walk on Water, the other exclusive track. The half dozen of the other was more like slipping into a bath of Radox, rather than an acid bath of Fish's invective and deep, complex wordplay. And with the best will in the world, didn't Pain and Heaven's chorus sound like an independent radio jingle for a new family solicitor? Divorce? Pain and Evans can help. Just off the market square. This wasn't the magnificent desperation of the Fish years, the triumph of the human spirit against almost insurmountable odds in a world that was totally fugazi. This new material was different. Yes, The title Pain and Heaven suggested a magnificent desperation, but something was missing. This didn't sound like vital music. It sounded sentimental. It didn't really sound desperate as such. Melodic? Was there anything that could rescue this? Was all lost for me and Marillion as the 90s beckoned? Well, there was something else on that album that kept me listening to the new Hogarth era, and that was the song Uninvited Guest. Uninvited Guest was as crunchy and catchy a rock song as you could ever hope to hear, with genuinely deep and complex lyrical themes. And I think it helped when the sleeve notes hinted that the subject matter may have been a Scotsman. There was a little hint of satire here, a bit of much needed bite. The other standout track for me was Hooks in You. Although it sounded like Incommunicado's younger brother, it was pretty good. And thankfully, at that time I hadn't seen the videos to any of these songs, which frankly would have put me off the whole thing. But that's more a comment on terrible late 80s video production rather than Hogarth era Marillion. So at least the Uninvited Guest meant the non-Fish tracks on the singles collection weren't a complete write-off. Maybe there was something there for Marillion into the 90s and beyond. And there the CD sat for nearly 5 years, my sole Marillion album, and certainly subjected to a few plays, particularly of the Fishy numbers. In 1996, I purchased the Fish era albums in Japanese mini sleeves. And by the way, if you think they're worth any money, please leave a comment. And if you're enjoying this video, please like and consider subscribing to Great Western. Well, here's the thing. Out of those Fish albums you see on display here, I didn't actually like Script or Fugazi very much. The best of those two albums was the crazed title track of Fugazi. But this wasn't the fishy singles of Kaylee, Lavender and Communicado. So if you think I'm making this video as an uncritical Fish fan, think again. If you listen to live recordings, Fish swore a lot, and he seemed to talk for hours between songs, neither of which I'm keen on. He was a staunch anti-Thatcherite, which I certainly wasn't in the 1980s, and all in all, he was, and doubtless remains, quite different to me in several important respects. And yet Fish was, and remains, a national treasure. A photogenic, bewhiskered Scots giant in a tartan jacket, with a winning smile and a rich and unforgettable baritone. A character who goes far beyond the cares and concerns and categories of neo-progressive rock fans in the 1980s. And that's what a couple of hit records will do for you. So, if Fish was a national treasure, what about Steve Hogarth? Now it's 1999, and I'm keeping track of Marillion through music magazines, and most music mags are pretty unenthusiastic about the albums that have followed the singles collection. Oh dear, maybe I was not alone in my thoughts about the new guy. However, me personally, I've not heard anything beyond the singles collection. So, what was the trigger that led me back to a reappraisal of the Hogarth era band? Fish, of course. Strangely, it was Clutching at Straws, Fish's final album. This was, by all accounts, a titanic Marillion album. But because it wasn't in that set of CDs that I'd purchased of the Fish years, I'd missed it. There was a clear line of succession from Misplaced Childhood, which I had enjoyed from that original 3, to Straws. And it meant I understood, finally, the level of success that late 80s Marillion had enjoyed. I only wished that those inventive Japanese had included Clutching at Straws in their mini set, because I'd really been missing out. From this day forth, Misplaced Childhood and Clutching at Straws would occupy the top two of my Fish album favourites, the positions only swapping depending on which album I had last played. In fact, Clutching at Straws was so good, and the band were clearly on a roll, musically and lyrically. It would be rude of me not to check out the album that followed it, Season's End. For a committed Fish fan like me, Season's End was a natural first choice to listen to H properly. The music was partly leftovers from 1988, some of which Fish had sung on, and the sleeve still had the old Marillion logo, so surely there could be some vestiges of the old Fish magic, if only by transference. There was. I enjoyed Season's End a lot. The opener, King of Sunset Town, was a proper Marillion track. You could imagine Fish singing over this one, despite maybe it being a bit less downbeat than we'd normally come to expect. And the voice. It has been suggested that towards 1987 to 88, Fish was losing his voice. Yes, he was literally losing his voice at some concerts, but he was losing his range, especially live. But nobody could level that accusation against Steve Hogarth on this performance. Steve's voice is astonishingly versatile, with a huge range. However, his phrasing was not necessarily as clear as Fish, who approached his vocals with a spitting enunciation. Well, there you go. Another standout track is Berlin, with dark and complex lyrics by John Helmer, who, incidentally, did most of the lyrics for the aforementioned Uninvited Guest. At this point in Hogarth's career, I would say without hesitation that Helmer is ruling the lyrical roost. Berlin contrasts the joyless life of being a showgirl or stripper in a seedy Berlin club during the Cold War, with the risks that people would take to cross from east to west, even risking death for freedom and love. It's a wonderful track, and there's even a sax solo. And you don't even notice there's a sax solo on a Marillion album. Season's End finishes with another remarkable track, The Space. Hogarth's lyrical idea is interesting, but it's the music that makes it. Sweeping, dramatic guitar and synths make the point to the listener plain. Marillion was never just Fish. Marillion make the music. And what music! One of the most poignant comments I ever saw on a Marillion fan page went like this: I cried when Fish left Marillion, but then I cried when I heard Steve sing After Me. With this song, with its shades of the first verses of Stairway to Heaven, Steve arrives and shines without the rest of the band getting in the way of his voice. It would be years before Marillion's musicians learned how to give Steve vocal space in the same way they had Fish. I'm of the view that Steve Hogarth wasn't well served by the mixing of Marillion's albums, and for that matter, neither was Pete Trevaris, but that's a story for another video. The band was still making a hole that Fish would fill, sonically, but Steve's voice wasn't the same timbre, and his phrasing was slower, much slower. In some ways, the band changed their sound over time, and I believe that H's voice started to feel a lot better and a lot more natural as they did so, but it did take time. 1994's Brave was disappointing in the sense that it never got going for me, despite some high points. But there was a standout track on 1995's Afraid of Sunlight. King. I am firmly of the opinion that this is one of Marillion's finest ever tracks. That theme of magnificent desperation is back with a vengeance on this one. The song drips desperation as it climaxes. Although in the song, the path of celebrity surely leads to death. Is it Elvis? Kurt Cobain? It's not hard to imagine Fish, not suicidal by the way, but it's hard not to imagine Fish trapped by management, fickle fame and uncertainty, wanting to get out of the Marillion spotlight. King is an epic track, and I believe it's the equal of anything they ever did with Fish. As the 90s headed towards the new millennium, it was clear that Hogarth had found his footing and made an indelible mark on Marillion, on his own terms. And for that, to step out of the big man's shadow, Steve H deserves a lot of credit. Now, if you think that I've misjudged Brave, and I have played it a fair few times, let me know in the comments below. And let me know which track I should analyse first. Thousands of Marillion fans can't be wrong, but I just want to know where I'm going wrong with Brave. 2004 saw the band come back with an album called Marbles, which is a fan favourite. Not one that I really got into, but there's some good stuff on there. And back into the top 10, unbelievably, of the UK charts with a wonderful song called You're Gone, which somehow brings together all those classic Marillion elements that you could argue were on their biggest 80s hits, like Kayleigh and Lavender. And yet H makes it all his own, particularly in the middle and closing sections where he uses his incredible voice to great effect, singing about how he and his lover, or some say the spirit of his dead father, have the early hours. H sings You're Gone in a way Fish never could, with an incredible falsetto. Here, Marillion evoke their own musical past rather than trying to run away from it, which I feel they spent a lot of the 90s doing. It's a satisfying brew, even though Marbles does have some long-winded moments. In 1995, Marillion record King. Just over a decade after that, they record a double album called Happiness is the Road. And on that album is a song that is one of my personal Marillion favourites called Half Full Jam. Well, it's a hidden track, but that's its name, essentially. And it's accompanied by what I would call its parent song, which is the excellent track Woke Up. Half Full Jam is a great building rock track. Organ, drums, bass, and an incisive lead guitar. But the desperation of Steve H as he screams his heart out, to my mind, about his life, his recent divorce, perhaps the loss of his children from his household. It's desperate, glorious stuff. And in my mind, I imagine him waking up alone in Ainhoe or some other honey-coloured North Oxfordshire village, alone, his wife and children gone, rattling around in an empty cottage. Another rock star failed marriage. Perhaps he even regretted not getting up to the Yorkshire Dales in 1989 and leaving it all behind. Maybe the song's not even about Steve, but this is what I mean about magnificent desperation. That shredded vocal is hard to disguise. And the fact that the track is shuffled anonymously onto the end of one side of the CD, I think that's very telling. Steve Hogarth changed Marillion in many ways, but it's undeniable that the band kept many of its existing fans and grew them into a large but very resilient, imaginative and loyal family that have kept the band afloat through some very dark times. They wouldn't have done that with a cut-price fish clone, in the same way that Genesis would not have survived with a Gabriel clone either. Reinvention was needed. Apart from their early 90s attempts to go mainstream pop rock, Marillion have done it their way, in no small measure due to the lyrics, stage presence and charisma of Steve Hogarth. At one time, Princes in Exile raised a standard drambuie to Marillion. H's tipple is harder to define, but we certainly know the glass is half full. I hope you enjoyed this exploration of Steve Hogarth's Marillion years. Thank you for watching Great Western, and see you next time. Thank you so much for watching Great Western, and I hope that you enjoyed this video. Please like this video and consider subscribing, because by doing that you will really encourage me, and there will be further insights into music, TV, tech and much more. Thanks so much. Bye bye.